Welcome to another episode of the Existential Hope podcast, where we're trying to explore the future with those who are shaping it. So today we have Siméon Campos joining us. Siméon is the president and founder of Safer AI. He's also a Foresight Institute fellow in the Existential Hope track, which is why we're very happy to have him. And he has dedicated the last few years to the development of safe AI practices. And so it will be very interesting to get his peace of mind on this. So yeah, welcome, Siméon. I'll just start with asking you, can you tell us what you're working on, what got you started, and like your life story in 3 minutes? How did you get into this?
Cool. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. So yeah, what am I working on? So I'm working on Safer AI, which is doing AI risk management and standardization primarily. So working on developing concrete rules that AI developers could apply in a way that would make AI development safer. How did I get into this kind of work? There was a French YouTuber, so I'm French, as you can hear. And there was a French YouTuber who was talking about AGI risks a lot. He's called Science for All. And so I started listening to that when I was 6. And then I did a trip to the Bay Area for 3 months close from Stanford. And then I was in a group house with people who were thinking a lot more about the current state of LLMs and AI safety. And so I dived deeper into those topics and then started thinking how I could apply, how it can be directly helpful on this topic. I was an econ student at the time. And so then, I co-founded the first organization, which was training people on these topics, not only on these topics, also on pandemic reduction. But we trained a couple hundred people on the safety topics. We created a bootcamp called ML for Good, which was training people on safety-related topics. And then more recently, I created Safer AI, which has been doing AI risk management standardization.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be interested to maybe just dive into one thing that you mentioned, which is like the state of large language models right now. I know that's something that you're very familiar with. Could you describe the current state of large language models? And also it would be very interesting to hear, since you got into this, like how that has developed.
Yeah, the current state is so the best models are basically GPT-4 and Claude 3, two of the best models. Those models, so GPT-4 was finished training about 1.5 years ago, and Claude 3 Opus finished training probably much more recently, but I think it's not fully representative of what we're going to see this year. So I'd say the state of large language model is, as we've done since 6 years, we keep training them on more computing power, so more GPUs, which are the computing units used to train AI systems, and they keep getting better and better. And what this means is that there are now capabilities across the board that are very advanced. So typically Claude 3 has a very good understanding of many complicated topics, like on standardization, which is what I'm working on. She knows a lot of things across the board and is able to do pretty complicated reasoning. I've heard and seen people talking about him being good at quantum physics and understanding about very niche papers that people have produced. And there are some surprising emerging capabilities, which I think are noteworthy. One of those is that at one point we were testing Claude 3 on whether it was able to catch a weird sentence in a very long context. So we had given it basically the equivalent of about 15 books. And at the middle of it, we had thrown a sentence on pizzas. And then we asked it a question about the pizza, and everything else is unrelated. And not only did Claude 3 able to find the sentence on the pizzas, but it also noted that it was weird that there was this sentence on pizzas at the middle of 15 books, and it said something along the lines of, it is likely that it is to test me that you are doing that, basically. And so it was very surprising, and it points to some of the worries that the AI, so the safety community, has had. I'd say that on the what changed from between current capabilities that are just publicly available and when I arrived, which was about 2020, 2021, is models became a lot more deeply knowledgeable. When I arrived, it was like GPT-3 basically. And GPT-3 was very impressive because it could do plausible sounding reasoning and had plausible sounding knowledge across the board, but was not easily usable for knowledge purposes. And now we're at the stage with GPT-4 class models where, in fact, they are really knowledgeable on a bunch of things in a way that today the fastest way you can learn things is probably using those models rather than reading some Wikipedia page or things like that. What's going to change, I'd say, is so as we'll keep growing the quantity of computing power that we throw on those, models are going to become better at deep reasoning, and in particular, AI developers are working hard on trying to apply techniques of reinforcement learning to models. So historically, reinforcement learning has been the part of the AI technology that has allowed models to become superhuman at things like Go, for instance. And so right now, AI developers are trying to apply this technology to large language models to try to make them a lot better at reasoning, and in particular, very long reasoning.
Yeah. What do you consider the most pressing extreme risks associated with AI given this development?
So it depends on how we define extreme. If we define as like killing 1 million people or something like that, I think it's mostly coming from misuse risks. So we know historically that some groups like Al-Qaeda or the Japanese sect, their cult has been trying to build some bioweapons, but they failed by in part by lack of available knowledge. As those models become like more closer from PhD levels everywhere, they're able to help to lower the barrier to entry to developing some pathogens that are actually working to kill many people. And so I think the shortest, in the couple of next years, the misuse risk through the potential design of bioweapon assisted by a large language model is going to be one of the primary sources of ways more than 1 million people could die. And if we're talking about more than that, more 1% of the population or things like that, then I think it's mostly misalignment concerns that like systems that are highly autonomous and capable of doing a range of things start optimizing for things that are deeply misaligned with humanistic interests, and that leads them to take an increasing amount of power, and because of this, potentially lead to a number of deaths.
Yeah, I think I heard you speak on a podcast about short AGI timelines, and it'd be very interesting to hear also how, since you got started, how has your perception changed related to that, since this sort of timelines of the AI community in general has changed a lot in the last few years. And
I'd say one of the early short timelines in some ways. The experience of getting into the AI field is getting surprised over and over again. So for instance, I remember early, I think 2022, it felt like maths wouldn't be something where large language models would be good at, because even the best models had a purely flat curve, like they were just close from zero at maths. And then 4 months after that, there was this paper called Minerva, which was getting really decent at maths. And so it was one of the personal experience of, oh man, even I feel like already I expected a lot of progress in AI, but even my predictions that are about specific capabilities that won't happen end up wrong. So I think the experience of being wrong and underestimating the progress rate is something which everyone has to go through to then be like, okay, actually it could be really fast. So I think 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, I started thinking that AGI, or basically the AI systems that could be highly dangerous, autonomously, not per misuse, would arise, had significant chances, so like 50% chance to happen by 2027 or less. And I think currently I still think that the main way this could be, I think, wrong is currently we start hitting an increasing number of challenges as we keep trying to multiply by 10 or 100 the amount of computing power we store in the same place. So for instance, having highly dense power sources has become more important now because the size of the clusters are so large that you can take down an electric grid if you're not careful. And basically, personally, I still expect by 2027, currently, but if over the course of the next year or the next 2 years, we see that the build-up in computing power slow down in terms of orders of magnitude, I think that would be a reason for optimism and for thinking that dangerous AI systems may arise closer in the 2030s or 2035. Because each additional order of magnitude is a bit harder to get. The reason I think it won't be a significant limiting factor is it feels to me like there are many parts of the process that can be optimized, like many stacks. So the most fundamental level, you have the Moore's law, so the tiny transistors, how small they can get. But between the tiny transistors and the actual training and the AI system, you have many different layers that are starting to get optimized. So you can make like metric multiplication a bit faster, or you can, in the process, you can rely on a different type of transistors, which allows to produce a lot more GPUs. A company recently called Grok did that. Things like that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what you think we should do to mitigate the risks arising from this. It would be interesting also, like, I know, you have a pretty interesting view, I think, on the global AI governance landscape right now. So it would be interesting if you could provide a summary of how you perceive the global AI governance landscape right now. And what you think we should do.
Cool. That's a lot of questions. I think the most important thing right now is to draw red lines, like strict red lines. So companies have drawn some orange lines in some way. So they said, if we hit this bar, we'll do X and Y and keep going. And I think we need to draw some strict red lines in, some people call that risk tolerance. Some others in risk management call that risk appetite. But basically, in nuclear safety, for instance, the NRC, which is the institution regulating nuclear in the US, has actually said nuclear power plants should not kill more than X people with that amount of that percentage of chance. Even as a guideline, say such things is very helpful because it sets a bar that you have to meet in some ways. And currently we don't have such a bar. So nobody has ever stated, we'll make sure that our AI system never has more than 1% chance to each other one. And so I'm worried that the later we'll do this thing, the more there will be goalposts moving in the process. So the more the amount of risk that we'll tolerate will be very high. So I think the current most important thing would be setting our risk tolerance and ensuring that it's enforced among companies, so that at least it's referred to in the way they communicate their risk management efforts. The second thing I think I'm most excited about is roughly there are two paths to trying to reach a world where extremely advanced AI systems are safe. First is try to gain time so that we have more time to make systems safe. And this has been, the community has been very vocal on this, like pause, discourse around pause and things like that, because AI capabilities has gone so fast that we feel like there's not enough time. So I think this is an important path, but there's another path which has receive much less attention, which is trying to develop safe capabilities. So trying to accelerate the development of agendas that have some non-trivial odds to actually reach like very significant capabilities in a more probably safe way. The issue currently with large language models is that we understand them so little, and they are, for instance, they have robustness problems that makes that it slightly will never get guaranteed on large language models. So if a large language model has dangerous abilities, I think we in the foreseeable future will never be able to say, oh, we know it won't do that or something like that, even if it is able to do. And there's another range of niche agendas, primarily driven by someone called David Dalrymple, alias Davidad, and Yoshua Benchiro, the Turing Prize winner. Though they had some ideas of how they want to develop some safe capabilities. And those ideas have not received nearly as much attention as I think they deserve. And they are not super well funded, I say. At least they could be a lot more funded. Like currently they are probably funded at something like 70 million, something like that. And any single major category could put 1 billion such things. And so I think the second area where I'm currently to the current margin most excited about is getting more excitement, discourse, and funding for those agendas, so that in the event we fail at posing AI development, which is a really difficult task, we have more chances to have safe ways to move forward. On the global AI governance landscape, what has been going on is, I'd say, a bit underwhelming in some sense. So I don't know if you remember, but in June, after the case statement and after the Future of Life Institute statement, there was a lot of excitement around how ambitious we could be and things like that. And now it's been like 9 months and not that much has happened on those fronts. A few major things have happened on the side. So one of those things is the international, so EDIS, international, I don't know what the D stands for, but Day for AI Safety, I think. So there was a day organized between China and a bunch of high-profile AI safety people from the West, like the head of the UK AI Safety Institute, people like that. And there was a lot more consensus that one could have expected. That was a big deal. And there were very fairly senior, high-profile Chinese officials, basically. So that was a big deal. But apart from that, so far we haven't had, we don't see yet a plausible path to an AI treaty, for instance, that could potentially help coordinate the different countries to put red lines. And the UK AI Safety Summit has not really focused on international governance that much. At least there wasn't any major progress towards such an AI treaty. And in the regular institutions like UNESCO, the United Nations, or ITU, which are 3 big bodies which have been caring about international AI governance, everyone is doing its own thing and trying to be the body responsible for AI governance. But so far, no one has reached the critical mass sufficient for everyone to rally around this and to have a lot of momentum. Yeah, I'd say in the international AI governance space, it's still a bit like we are looking for some shilling point to rally around and where coordination can happen. And it's not clear yet what this will be. Yeah.
Did you mention the EU AI Act? Or
no, I did not mention because I don't consider this international in some ways. But yeah, so the EU AI Act was passed, has like pretty decent regulation on large language models. It is a product safety law. It only applies to products. So it's not yet clear how helpful it will be for things. Yeah, if we ever develop something like AGI, like I don't think OpenAI would care that much a priori about productizing AGI or something. So it's not clear if the law will even apply to OpenAI trying to develop AGI, because if OpenAI decides to not release the model in the EU, then the EU won't have hold on this. But I think it is valuable, at least on a symbolic level, very significant, that a significant body of states have taken the risk in some ways of regulating, because there's a risk of falling behind. And it's also, other countries are interested, looking at it in some ways, how it's going, etc. Yes, I think the UA Act is a very good first milestone. And I think combined with the executive order in the US, if it survives for elections, those could be two very important regulations that help setting the world on the track of safe AI development.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah, I like the idea also what you said of drawing clear red lines. That seems like definitely something that should be done. Is that part of what you're doing at Safer? I know you're working to develop standards. So it'd be very interesting to hear like what you mean by standards, and also what does the process of developing AI safety standards look like?
Yeah, so it's not really about red line standards. At least currently no standardization body has the mandate or has a strong mandate to say we shouldn't train systems that do that. Standards is, I'd say, a pretty large word which encompasses all the technical details that allows law to be effective. So in some way, for instance, one example of a piece of the UA Act is that there are some articles that say that AI systems with certain criteria should manage risk up to acceptable levels, like to reach at acceptable levels of risk. And this is very vague, as you can guess. And so standards is the process which allows to refine those legal requirements into things that are applicable by some practitioners. So it involves a lot of conversion of the state of the art. For instance, if you're trying to do standards on mitigating virus, let's say, so production of virus we discussed, then you're going to look like at the literature of everyone who wrote about this, and then you're going to look for typical mitigations that are discussed and see if, based on those mitigations, there are reasonable requirements or at least guidance that you can provide that would help an AI developer do his job, mitigating AI risk. The standardization process is very political. It depends on which standardization body, but for instance, in the EU and international standardization bodies that are respectively called CENTILEC and ISO, IEC, there's everyone. So there are companies, representatives, there are civil society representatives, non-profits, etc. And there are some policymakers and some academics. And so all those people are supposed to agree. It's a consensus-based process. A standard, supposedly all changes are supposed to be agreed upon by everyone. And so what it means that it's a lot of politics. Typically, you have to, if you want to contribute something, you have to convince everyone that it's worth putting it in there, and you have to argue about why this is in line with the mandate that has been given to the standardization bodies. So it's a very lengthy process, very important for actual application of the law, but very lengthy. One example of why it's important is in GDPR. So GDPR, there are those cookie banners that are very annoying, come in all shapes and forms. And one of the reasons why there's nothing which is similar across these banners is that GDPR hasn't been standardized. So GDPR there was just some legal requirements that companies have to apply. And so because it hasn't been standardized, the level of details was not low enough for people to agree on how to do that. And so you end up with those enormous amounts of key banners all over the place that are annoying everyone. Whereas one-way standardization may have resolved this issue is saying you could have a browser level preference and say that you always want to refuse those cookies, and but the law was not clear and there were no standards, so that didn't happen.
What for progress on AI safety work in general, what do you think is holding progress back? Is it funding? Is it political? Anything else?
That's a good question. So I'd split AI safety in two big buckets. There's, I'd say, the marginalist AI safety agenda and the ambitious AI safety agenda in some ways. Maybe it's not fair because there's ambitious is more positively connotated, but anyway, so you see my preference. But basically, most of AI safety so far has been trying to make LLMs, which are the current things that are working in terms of capabilities, safer. So we're trying to understand them. So interpretability, or trying to make them more robust. Things like reinforcement learning from human feedback, things like that. And I think the other way, which has been a lot more neglected, is, and which is what I was referring to when talking about Benjio and David Dalter, is trying to build a system which is not an LLM, or it's just not only an LLM, which is safe by design. So which you build in a way where you try to, preserve some property. One property you may want is having a system you understand. So interpretability. So you could try to prototype at small scale some some systems that are interpretable. And then once you have something with the desirable safety properties you're looking for, we have this magical property in AI, which is called scaling laws. So far, most of the progress has come from scaling deep neural networks. And so if you have prototype something at small scale which works, hopefully if you're able to make it highly parallelizable on GPUs, on the units that are helping to train GS systems, you might be able to get the capabilities that you want for an advanced AI system. So I'd say there, at a high level, there are two approaches. One approach is take the currently capable systems and make them safer. The issue with that is that LLMs have a bunch of really bad properties for this. For instance, it's very unlikely that they'll ever be fully interpretable, at least in the near term. And then there's the other approach, which is try to make a model safe and then try to give it capabilities in some ways, which I think is more reasonable, because I think the safety problem is harder than the capabilities problems in some ways. And so it's harder to make and guarantee that your system is safe than to give it capabilities, because thanks to scaling laws, it's not as hard as it may seem to give systems capabilities. I'd say those two things are held back by very different things. So the LLM safety path has received a decent amount of funding, but the issue is that the ground problem is just really hard. Making team in LLMs has now started, I think, since probably Chrysaor started 5 years ago, and basically it hasn't done that much progress. Right now, there's hope that we solve one of the problems, or the main problem that has held back the field, but it's not yet clear that it has been solved, and there's still like a bunch of other problems, basically. And so I'd say that the problem of the LLM safety committee is just that the problem is really hard. Like, the problem they're trying to solve is really hard. So what I don't like with the LLM safety side of things is that the vibe is a lot more, let's try to do our best rather than let's set a bar and then meet it, because it's likely that we just won't be able in LLMs to meet the required bar. And there basically was hold a safety. I'm not exactly sure. I think there was a lot more funding. I think things would probably go faster. And talent is probably a big bottleneck, especially at the level of experience that people want to have at labs. As far as I understand, the OpenAI team at least was a bottleneck by this aspect. On the safety capability side, I think it's bottleneck by a lot of things, but primarily people not knowing that much about it. And so people diving by default into the other one. And then funding is not that big of a deal. And historical funders of the field don't know that much about this or aren't super excited about this over cluster. So there's not that much development, that much funding for interest.
Yeah, that was very interesting to hear. I like your take of the two buckets. And yeah, very impressed with David's work as well. I'm going to try to transition us from this very AI safety focus to like this existential hope part of the podcast. I'd be very curious to hear, would you describe yourself as someone who's positive or like optimistic about the future? Do you think it's going to go well, or are you more terrified?
Yeah. So I'd say when I'm coldly thinking about it, I'm more very pessimistic by default. Like, I think it's most likely go wrong and potentially it goes extremely well or something. But I'd say on the daily basis, I wouldn't describe me as terrified. Like, on the daily basis, I think I tend to have a fairly optimistic nature. Yeah. So yes, I'd say cognitively terrified, but practically optimistic, and on the fact that we can steer things a lot and we can improve things a lot.
Totally understand the divide there as well. And in terms of, so one thing that we always ask is that we ask for an example of a eucatastrophe, which is the concept comes from Tolkien originally, but where we got the whole like existential hope phrase from was a paper by Toby Ord and Cotton Baird called Existential Risk and Existential Hope. And in there, they bring up this like example of a eucatastrophe, which is basically the opposite of a catastrophe. So it's like an event that when it happens, the world is much better off. And so it would be interesting if you try to imagine you get to choose one eucatastrophe event that happens to us in the next 100 years or so. What would that be? Can you share a vision for that?
Yeah. So I think that the agenda is pretty solid for that. So I think safe AGI can both be a catastrophe or a eucatastrophe. And then that vision offers a very promising path, I think, to eucatastrophe. So the first component is safe capabilities. So being able to develop extremely advanced AI systems, but with safe capabilities. And the second aspect, which I think is usually neglected, but not by David, is governance. So that envisions some form of international governance where there's a multi-stakeholder bargaining process where you try to ensure that AGI development doesn't benefit only to a few, but to most people, which is not a given because advanced AI systems are probably the most power concentrated technology ever developed. Like it might be the first time where 100 people could, in principle, control everyone else. And so this over governance aspect is also really important. And then if this whole thing goes well, I think just how could it look like? I think one thing which could be awesome is like, currently, lives of individuals are very predetermined by their genes and where they're born and things like that. And I think that technology could alleviate that a lot in some sense. So could allow people to be more what they wish they were or something, rather than like having thrown the dice and having being lucky or unlucky. So I think this is one feature which I feel is very exciting of a potential world with, safe AGI. Yeah, I think this is, and this means a lot for everyone. So it means that, it just means that you're connected to the person you would like to be. So if you wanted to be, imagine, for instance, being, in French, we say kleptoman. Does it mean like stealing stuff, all the time? There's, a mental issue where you can steal things all the time, even without noticing. Imagine being this, it's likely that you don't want to be this. I think post-AGI world could be that someone could reconcile the two. Have a much better, feel a lot better, enjoy a lot more life. And then there are all the obvious problems that are currently out there that could be solved. Poverty, like people not having food or people having disease, is pretty likely there. If you had safe AGR and a solid international governance, we could of such things.
I agree in terms of individuals' life being predetermined. There seems like a lot of just like happiness is even genetic. And there's a lot of exciting applications now that could potentially be just like a few neurotech approaches that have come up recently. And we had Hannu Rajanimi on the podcast recently, who runs a biotech startup, and he spoke a lot about how, you could do a lot of more preventative interventions for people's health and just better healthcare in general. So very exciting vision, I think. Is there one thing I'd be curious here is we've spoken about, I think we've run around like AI and AGI a bit. So it would be interesting. Do you think that something like this, would we need AGI to achieve this, or could we do it with highly capable narrow AI?
Yeah, so I think, AGI first is underdefined. I use it by convenience because it has become the standard term to talk about this extremely intelligent thing that helps to do a lot across the board in a way as good as human experts or better. But I think that there's nothing that tells that we couldn't get most of those benefits with narrow AI system. Typically, reinforcement learning has been successfully applied to a bunch of very important problems in a narrow way and solve that in a very narrow way. So protein folding is one example. AlphaFold solved protein folding, which has many applications in drug design and development. Another application recently was forecasting of weather forecasting. Google DeepMind released the world-best system to forecast weather, that it doubled the range of what we were able to before. And it allowed to unlock those capabilities. So I definitely think that it would probably take a bit more time, but it would be possible to get many narrow tools or AI systems that unlock most of what we care about. Yes, without needing this like general purpose AI system. I think it would just take probably a lot more time and a lot more care in the design. When you're trying to solve systems like that, solve problems, you need to care about the specific properties of the problem and then design a custom system for it. Whereas it's more like magic, like you just throw a lot of data and train it for a lot of time and you discover what comes out of it. And usually it's pretty capable. But yes, I don't think there is anything that prevents narrow AI systems from at least unlocking a large share of a lot of the value at this firm.
I think it's interesting. We just did a world building challenge within this Existential Hope program. And then we tried to imagine the world in 2045, even with just like narrow AI. And it's pretty like, without getting too crazy, it is pretty crazy how big of a change it could make, even with.
I think the main thing, you probably couldn't get automated research and development. So automated research and development is what makes AI systems our general purpose AI systems extremely world changing. Like it's going to probably change everything really fast. I don't think you can get that with narrow systems, but what you can do with narrow systems is the problems you have to solve in various fields and solve those problems well with one narrow system. So it's just a lot slower, but I think this is still feasible.
I think on that topic, are there any other technologies that you think are relevant to build a positive future other than AI? Is there any other technology that you're excited about right now?
I used to be looking a lot more into climate change. So I'm pretty excited by carbon removal technology. At this point, I think it's pretty likely that we make it on the climate change sort of shit, because electric vehicle batteries and solar power, all those things have went extremely well. But I still think that carbon removal is not yet a victory. So I think this going a lot better would be really good for at least for everyone living in the south, in the south. And then in terms of more general purpose technology, I haven't thought that much myself about it, but so whole brain emulation seems like something that could allow to get most of the benefits of FNCA systems with potentially a bit less uncertainty or a bit less risks. Yes, at least some people I respect a lot the force of think that. I haven't found any obvious counter examples so far. So I think, yes, this whole brain emulation technology, and so everything which is contained to it, potentially the scanning technology and simulation technology, all these things could be one potential path to safe, very advanced capabilities.
Yeah, I think the whole brain emulation approach is interesting also. We're funding some work on it at Foresight Institute. I think it's a bit scary though, because to me, it seems, maybe this is just my gut feeling, but it seems like there would be a high risk of creating something that's like sentient, which seems scary.
Yes,
like,
I agree this.
And yeah.
I agree that it would likely, it would have at least much higher chances than AI systems to be sentient by default. Although, as long as we have no understanding of sentience, we can't rule out that our current LLMs or next generation will be, at least under some definitions, are sentient. So I think like, to me, it's not obviously a lot worse than our current AI development, because, for instance, if made sentient situations to LLMs, what you're currently doing to LLMs is really terrible in some ways, like constantly punishing them for doing bad stuff and like changing them to make them better. Is as I said, probably wrong, but if there are things like sentience, I think the period from now until we understand sentience and consciousness will be quite terrible, basically. It seems very likely. Whether we take WBE or the path.
I listened to a podcast recently with Michael Levin, who's a biologist, I think, and that was I think a bit of a scare for me, because he's a biologist and it's very clear that he's talking about, when he speaks about biology, that also seems to be computations, similar to like and so that's where the parallels just
the parallel is super strong. One thing which was striking is that in biology there scaling laws exist as well. The size of the brain and the number of neurons, especially in the prefrontal cortex, seem to be a very good predictor for overall intelligence. And there's one biologist who's been studying that for a while now, scaling laws of intelligence among biological neural networks, which is very interesting, given that we observe that in artificial neural networks as well. And I have a friend who's like very much into reading all the papers that exist on archives, and there seems to be a lot more analogies between LLMs and human brains than I thought there would be. Like, yes, it seems like, at least according to what I remember from our conversation, that many of the things we observe among LLMs and stuff, we can compare reasonably well with things that are observable among artificial neural networks. Among biological neural networks. For instance, I think there were some people who are trying to use data from neuroscience and from scanning brains to predict things from LLMs, or the other way around, and that it was a lot better than what they expected, if I recall correctly. And things like that.
Yeah, that's another thing to worry about then in relation to AI, not just...
It doesn't necessarily mean a lot on the consciousness of LLMs, that there are some similar patterns, but yes, I think it's highly worrying. I wish we had consciousness before going into that realm, because if we discover that the 100 million instances of LLMs, or probably billion of instances of LLMs are sentient, it would be such a short. That may be actually one of the things that future historians will love about for us. In the same way, we're like, back in the days, we considered some people with certain races not having souls or whatever. Plausibly, in 200 years, if we are still around, so people will be like, oh, those guys were developing LLMs who were like fully sentient, and they were just like applying reinforcement learning with feedback to them. And
yeah, it almost seems pretty likely given how we look back on something.
yes, yeah, I think we already have animals, so we don't need to invent new forms of consciousness to be almost certain that people will find that we have shameful behavior. But yeah, plausibly this is to add on top of the animal welfare disaster.
Yeah, I was thinking that LLMs have the benefit of being able to speak in the language that we do. So maybe but animals are also like cute. But maybe if we make, I don't know, cute robots, people would care.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's right. But the issue is there would be no difference between an LLM which would be not conscious and say this, and one which would be conscious and say this. And it's actually fun because people have been, thanks to LLMs and someone rediscovering the issue which has been discussed about, for instance, on Less Wrong, but in philosophy as well. On Less Wrong, it's called like philosophical zombies. I'm not sure it's a Less Wrong terminology, but the idea that just everyone doesn't have consciousness except you or something. Like this could be true, right? Like the only reason I think you are conscious is because that we have a similar architecture. So I'm inferring that, and you react to harms and to rewards in a way quite similar to me. I think it's likely you're conscious, but I actually have no proof that you're conscious. And so people are rediscovering that with large language models because they're saying, they have been trained on data to say this. So that's normal that they say this. Sure. But in the same way, I can't really, except by analogy, I can't really reason about whether you're conscious or not.
Yeah. I also, don't even want to go there thinking about all of that. I have a few short final questions, but is there anything you'd like to make sure we touch on before we round off?
No, not that I can think of.
Great. So just for someone who is maybe not familiar with the field of AI safety, is there anything you would recommend, like any resource that you would recommend that they read or listen to or watch? Yeah,
I'm not sure there's one resource, but I had done a meta resource on my website. So my website is Siméon, so Simeon.ai, and I have something which is called Intro to AI resources or something. And there's a lot of stuff there of what I think are good intro pieces, intro videos, and things with different levels of difficulties.
Oh, great. I see it now. It's very organized as well. It's, divided by things that don't require any sort of technical understanding.
Yeah. I tried to make it because I used to advise many people on that stuff. Last year, many people were trying to get into the field. And so a range of people were asking me for stuff. And so I ended up doing this.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. What is there, when you think about existential hope, is there anyone you think is inspiring? Anyone you think we should have on the podcast?
Yeah, I think David Dalrymple is the person who changed the most my mind about those things. Yeah, I think he has by far of everyone I've encountered the most, I'd say, ambitious and plausible vision in some ways that could actually work in some ways. And I think they're worth inviting if you can have him. Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. We haven't even asked. So last question is just, what's the best advice you ever received? I guess one that I enjoyed and that I think has shaped a lot my life trajectory is, so when I was like 15, I had like extremely settled ideas in large part because of where I had grew up. Just with politicized ideas and things like that. And I think what most changed this over time is people, in particular, a couple of YouTubers and friends who advise to not attach your identity to ideas, to specific ideas. I think it's probably one of the biggest reasons why people are wrong. And I think, early stage in life, it can make absolutely huge differences. Basically, I think that my current trajectory is very contingent on a few friends and a few YouTubers I was looking at when I was 16, thanks to my environment. Otherwise, currently I would be probably hardcore left-winger and with very idiosyncratic thoughts on a range of topics that largely determined by the media I grew up in.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice to end on. Just not attach your identity too much to ideas so that you can update if you receive new information or something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Siméon, for coming. It was lovely to have you and look forward to following your work and everything you do in the future. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a lot for having me, Beatrice.